Hello and welcome to Power and Purpose, a podcast exploring leadership in sport, business and beyond. And joining me once again, I've got the brains behind this pod, my fellow co-hosts Maro and Will Troost-Ekong. And if you don't know who they are, who we are, then you've come to the right podcast, because we're going to spend the next hour or so getting to know each other beyond the Wikipedia write-ups. So, gentlemen, I feel a little bit anxious when I talk about getting to know and sharing more. I don't know what that evokes within each of you when you talk about potentially sharing more about yourself.
I feel all right with it. I think being honest, being a little bit vulnerable is good. And yeah, we've obviously known each other for a little while now, but there's still loads for us to unpack. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah.
And Will, how are you feeling?
We're going to be here for a long time together, guys. So we might as well get to know each other. No, and I think it's always interesting to understand where someone's coming from, because at the end of the day, that is often what gives them direction, right? So yeah, no, it's going to be good to hear your story and to understand Maro's as well.
Yeah, and look, this is all part of the process, right? What would be the point of a podcast if you could just Google us and find out everything that you think you know? So I'm really excited about listening to you both and seeing where we go. So I thought it would be a good place to start as home, because home really is the foundation of, I guess, who we are and what we become, I'd suggest. And I know that from the chats that we've had, we've all got different relationships with home. So, for example, I mean, Will, you know, when we first got chatting, you know, the London accent is coming out and I'm like connecting with that. And then you're busting out Dutch. And then I'm like, wow, okay, this is different, which I loved. So I don't know if we start there. What does home mean to us? And Will, like, you know, you've got a really interesting backstory. So I don't know how much you want to share about what home is to you.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. So I was born and raised in Holland, a small town called Hoofddorp, which is right next to Schiphol Airport, if any of you guys have been there. So very normal upbringing. I went to a Montessori school there until I was 12. I fell in love with playing football with my friends at school. I'll never forget the first goal I scored on the playground. I was just goal hanging for the whole break time, and finally the ball popped up and I managed to score. And yeah, I feel like that feeling kind of ignited something in me. And when I was 11, I left school there to go to a boarding school in the UK, in Bishop Stortford, a school called Hockerel Anglo-European College, where I was following my sister's footsteps. So she's 2 years older than me. And that kind of opened up a whole new world for me, being in the UK. And I think because my teenage years were spent there, that kind of grown to feel like home. And yeah, in between all of that, I spent a lot of time in Nigeria as well. So my dad has always lived in Lagos. My mum worked for KLM Airlines, so we had all the perks of staff tickets, which meant that you could fly if there was a seat available. So I spent a lot of hours on jump seats. Even before 9/11, we were allowed to fly in the cockpit once or twice. Obviously not allowed to touch anything. And then you'll be there for your best behavior for 6 hours from Amsterdam to Lagos all the way back. So yeah, I feel like for me, home feels like a lot of different places. Now it's really become the UK. I think maybe also because my kids are born there. I met my wife there. Obviously, I spend a lot of time traveling, playing in a lot of different countries, but we always seem to find ourselves back in Hertfordshire. So that kind of feels like my base. And if I think about flying home now, landing at Heathrow Stansted, this feels a little bit more familiar than maybe in Holland or in Lagos. But I feel like whenever I'm in one of the three places, I always miss something from the other two. So I kind of feel like I'm stuck between all of those. But yeah, I would see my near future being in the UK. But yeah, you never know. I'm currently in Saudi Arabia, so we'll see how that unfolds. But yeah, I think definitely when I have more of my own time and probably when I stop playing, so you can make your own decisions a bit more. I'll definitely concentrate on being there. And I know my kids are very settled there in school, so I'll carry on working on my English accent.
So Saudi's definitely not home.
Saudi, starting to feel a bit like home, but it's different. I feel like whenever I'm somewhere for quote unquote work, you try to make the most of the situation. I'm interested in different cultures, languages, but yeah, I feel like home now is where my kids are. I think that's probably the biggest thing in the family. So I try to make myself at home, but it doesn't really feel the same as being in Hertfordshire.
Will, you talked about a small village in Holland. Now, for me, that scares me, right? That's me kind of being a North London boy growing up in, like large London, as I would say. So what was that? What was that place like? Can you bring it to life for us? Because I'm trying to picture it in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it was everything was in cycling distance. So us Dutch people, we love bikes. I would go as far as my little legs would take me on the bike. Everything was also within reach, from my school to my local football club to the playgrounds that I played with my friends. So we lived on terrace housing on an estate where they had loads of different playgrounds, and street football is a big thing in Holland. So they have a lot of these courts where kids come together. So that was really my thing. And in Holland, I think we've got quite a mix of cultures, different people. A lot of Moroccans that live in Holland, Turkish people, not so many Nigerians in Hoofddorp where I was. But we have a lot of people from Suriname and Dutch Antilles, so different islands, maybe Dutch colonies that were there. So it was quite a mix of backgrounds of friends that I had, and of course, kids whose family were completely Dutch. So, it felt really safe. It was obviously a lot of things that I could do independently, because as far as I could cycle there on my bike, that was a normal thing to do. I think maybe that's also something that's probably changed over the years. We all played outside at that time. It was quite normal. It wasn't clogs, windmills, and milking cows, if that's what you're thinking of a small village.
I was. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be vulnerable here and just say I had visions. When you're talking about riding the bike as well, that kind of just like played right into the thoughts in my mind. Yeah. I kind of had you in them little shorts and stuff. Like, it's just my relationship with the rest of Europe, actually, despite being quite well traveled, is actually, based on what I'm fed through the television, right? That's pretty much my reality beyond visiting capitals. So that's why I was really fascinated about that.
Well, so obviously you are half Dutch, you're half Nigerian, and you spent a good chunk of your life growing up in London. Is there a part of your identity that you resonate more with?
That's a really good question. I think that's kind of been maybe the story of my adolescent life, is kind of seeking out what I really felt at home with, because being in the Netherlands, even though we had quite a multicultural friends group, I always felt a bit of a foreigner, and maybe also with the way I looked, being mixed race. And then when I came to the UK, I also felt like I was a foreigner, even, because my Dutch accent was really strong at the time. And the school I was at, everything felt really new. I had to adapt to that. And then funny enough, I was spent a lot of time in Nigeria when I was a kid. A lot of those years you obviously forget, but you remember feelings, some moments. And I had a real interest in trying to explore that more and understand what my heritage was. So I think when I was in my late teens, early 20s, that was really something that I was interested in and I wanted to know more about. Growing up mostly with my mum, spending not so much time with my dad, I had a real question mark about, who I really was, where I was really from. And I feel like as the years have passed, maybe also because I had a chance to go back to Nigeria more frequently, I really identified with how people felt, and maybe the warmth and the busyness of a place like Nigeria that is sometimes, hectic. It's something that really felt homely and natural for me as well. So I think it's been a journey, and I kind of had to maybe discover that part of my Nigerian heritage a bit more by myself, because I'm not so close with my dad now, so I didn't have a chance to really explore that with him. But yeah, I felt like that was definitely something that gave me a better understanding of who I was, and where you get your power from, and names are also a very powerful thing, especially in Nigeria. So yeah, when you go back to your village and you understand that Ekong is synonymous with that place and the meaning of the name, then yeah, it's something quite powerful, and I think something really special, and I think that's also kind of forced me to make that a conscious decision for my children now as well, because they're growing up in the UK. They meet their grandma, who's Dutch. Don't spend a lot of time there. She spends more time visiting them in the UK. So yeah, this summer when we had a chance to take my oldest two to Nigeria for the first time, it was something like I really enjoyed seeing them understanding that part of their culture, their background, and also something that I've grown to identify with so much. So that was really important for me, and I think that has been such a luxury of my childhood, having the chance to go to Nigeria when I was a kid, to see that, experience that. Even going to the UK at a young age, being exposed to new things again, new environments. I think it just helps people build confidence and become more rounded people really. So I think that's kind of my take on that.
Leon, I think this is a very interesting topic, I guess, because I think it's a phenomenon that a lot of mixed race individuals feel, and a lot of mixed race individuals battle with, like, who do they identify with? What side of their identity do they lean more towards? And I know a lot of people, as you've kind of alluded to, well, a lot of people kind of struggle with that. A lot of people kind of struggle trying to navigate that path. I was wondering, from your life and experiences, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I say it's a podcast. It's an entire series, and then another series, and another series off the back of that. Because during my life, I've kind of talked and written about, I say mixed race proudly, but others would pull me up on that and say, well, hang on, it's dual heritage, because that's kind of what academics have been referring to, people with mixed identities, and there's mixed heritage, etc. So even like the terminology is constantly changing and evolving. And I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing, by the way, but it just kind of underlines how complex identity can and is. So I'm always conscious that when I'm talking about this, I'm not saying this is what it is, because everyone has their different positionality and their different experiences. So it'd be wrong for me to say I identify as a person of mixed heritage who is Black. So I do the blacklist. So I believe my experience in the world is as a Black person, but it can have differences, obviously, in terms of how I've been brought up, in terms of my heritage. So I would sit down at the dinner table on a Sunday in my household, which is part Jamaican, part Irish, part English, and have a roast dinner. But then I would have had rice and peas and jerk chicken and curry goat. It's a complete mix of different things. And actually, when we had a fry up, it would be kind of plantain. I know you guys would say plantain in Nigeria.
I was going to correct you on that.
I'd have that's another debate as well. But I would have plantain on the plate with a fry up, right? That was my household. Now, there's something quite beautiful about that. But actually, I think a lot of the kind of discussion points have been around like choosing a room. And it's a bit like choosing, well, if the house is on fire, which one of your parents would you save? I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Like you can't make that decision. You would want to save, both of your parents, ideally, and you wouldn't want to be making choices. But I think in a world where, and in our country, in the UK, the fastest growing group are people of mixed race. So we've got to get our heads around, identity and understanding the complexities and beauties of those complexities around identity, I believe. Because if I look at my daughter, my two daughters, you probably look at one of my daughters and say, she's going to struggle maybe to connect with her identity through her Jamaican grandma. But actually, the way she behaves around the house and the way she is, she's connecting with those roots in a really beautiful way. But when she steps out of the house, she's a blonde girl with blue eyes. But she's connecting, right? And we've made a big thing about taking our kids back to Jamaica. They've been back twice. And we're not putting on them what it means to be Jamaican, because what does it mean to be Jamaican? People who've never been to Jamaica are constantly telling me what Jamaica's like. You know, they're thinking it's like Rastafarians walking around and bad man this, bad man that. Actually, if you go there, it's a very conservative country. It's around church. It's around discipline. It's around behavior. So the things they've been taught through the TV about their own identity as people of Jamaican heritage, actually, I would question and would say, well, that's not what I've experienced actually being in the country. So, I just think it's such a beautifully complex thing, where we just have to continue speaking to each other and understanding each other, because identity is evolving. I mean, you know, Maro, you're the proud captain of England rugby, you know, singing the anthem. You're the front man for the British Lions. And I love the fact that you are so connected to your Nigerian heritage. When you walked into that room for the Lions captains, you didn't wear a grey suit and a white shirt and a red tie. And that I found was interesting, that you wore what you felt comfortable in and you owned it. Like, for me, from the outside looking in, and I'd be really interested in your take, you owned your identity in that space. And I didn't feel you gave something up. You just said, this is what it is. This is what it means to be an England and Lions captain. And there's something quite beautiful about that.
Yeah, I think authenticity is key, with regardless of what you're doing in life. And I guess what I had to deal with is slightly different to what you guys had to deal with, as you guys are dual heritage. I would describe my experience as, you know, perhaps sailing through different identities, or almost say hyphenated identity, where I consider myself Nigerian and British, or British and Nigerian, or I'm a very, very proud Londoner. I love London. I think it's one of the best cities in the world, particularly the red side of London.
We were getting on so well, Maro. We were getting on so well. I'm going to put myself on mute. Sorry, continue.
And yeah, I think for me, what I found is, once you have a strong foundation of who you are, what you believe, what you stand for, what you consider important, it's easy to then go out in the world and be yourself. And I think we live in a world where it lacks nuance. We live in a world where you're either this or that. You like this or you hate that, or etc., etc. And I just think that there's so much more nuance to life. So I am Nigerian as well as English. I am Nigerian as well as British. I love playing for my country. I love representing England. I love representing the British and Irish Lions. And I also love my heritage. I love being Nigerian. I love the food. I love the culture. I love the dynamism of the people. And I think being comfortable with that then allows you to be able to straddle whichever, you know, world or space that you want to operate. And that's how I found it through my experience.
Would you say that is something that is like almost like a new direction of our generation, where seeing that comfortability is actually something that people strive for, and they, like you said, they don't really want to choose, or don't feel like they have to choose left or right with who they are, and it's more normal maybe to even find people who probably have a similar background and saying, you know, this is really what I stand for, and I'm happy and proud to be both. I don't feel like I need to be either side.
Yeah, I think, you know, our generation, maybe Leon's a little bit older than us.
Wait, I'm getting it today. Maro's coming for me, man. Trust me.
But our generation, particularly amongst a lot of my contemporaries, there's now second generation people coming from the Africa or Jamaica or Asia. There's now third generation people, and my parents have kind of been back and forth to London and Nigeria for pretty much all their lives, but they settled in London in the early 90s. They were raised Nigerian. They are Nigerian. If you speak to them today, they're Nigerian. But I was born here, so my experiences are very much different to them. I understand a nuance to British culture in a way that they don't understand, even though they've been in this country for longer than me. I've kind of grown up in that world. But in the same sense, they understand Nigeria in a way that perhaps I don't quite understand yet, because I haven't spent that much time. Now, when I eventually have children, my children will be third generation. In an ideal world, I love to live between London and Lagos, but let's just say I raise my children in London. They're now going to be 2 generations removed from that Nigerian culture. So their understanding of things are going to be different. So I will have a greater understanding than them, because I've had direct contact with my Nigerian parents and their culture. And, I intend to raise my children in that fashion, but just because I don't have all the cultural nuances that they have, is going to be a little bit removed. So I say that to point out, each generation kind of needs to find its own way of navigating the world, and each generation has a slightly different understanding of their connection to their heritage. And it's about being comfortable in that, it's about living in that, and it's about navigating a way where, in my view, you should be proud of where you come from and where you live and how you identify.
Would you agree that it's become easier now? Because obviously, I feel like as the years pass, the lines become a little bit more blurred of what is seen as one place, and maybe the accessibility of being able to travel, and also, the continuous development of saying second, third, fourth generation, where it could be easy to forget maybe where that original heritage comes from, and maybe how important is that, what your parents gave to you to make you the confident Maro that we see today, that, like Leon described, would walk into a presentation like that as a British Nigerian man?
So I think a number of things here. And I remember when I was growing up, it wasn't necessarily cool to be African. The Leon and his mates and the Jamaican mates were taking the mick out of us Nigerians.
It was weird. You're right. It was weird. There was conflict for sure. There was conflict. 100%. What butter you used and what cream you used. It was two cultures butting up against each other. Sorry, Maro.
But today, look at today. Today, everyone wants to be Nigerian. Everyone wants to be African. Everyone wants to, and that's as a result of, one, the pride that a lot of Africans in the diaspora, as well as Africans in Africa, have around their culture, their space where they come from. But in addition to that, culture, so like music, the arts, football's had a massive role. Some of the stars that we've had from the continent who's played in the Premier League, they've all contributed to the growth of that. Probably the increase in tourism and the change of growing up. A lot of people's only interaction with Africa was probably the charity adverts on TV, whereas now more and more people are going to Africa. The growth of Dirty December, etc., etc. So I think all these things contribute to the changing that we've seen and we've all witnessed about the growth and the pride of African culture. So much so, like the Notting Hill Carnival, people are complaining that it's too much Afrobeats.
The takeover.
People are complaining. People will. So it's definitely been a joy to see and be a part of.
In the England change room or in the British Lions change room, are you sticking on some Afrobeats when the boys are getting ready, or what is the vibe there?
Well, I'm not normally on music. I think my music taste is a little bit different to a lot of the other guys. But it's popular. So in 2019, when we went to the World Cup in Japan, the theme song for the whole campaign was "Burna Boy Yay." Like,
Love that.
it was on all the time. It was on all the time in the gym, at least 3 or 4 times a day.
Were you screaming along?
Everyone was screaming along. Guys that you
Love that.
completely wouldn't expect, who barely know who Burna Boy is, they'll say, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
They were singing
amazing.
along.
Well, guys, listen, this is a conversation that I've really needed, right? Because in recent weeks, you just flick on the news and actually the conversation we're having isn't really reflected in the feeling of some people within, the UK at the moment. All of this, conversation around raising flags, etc. People are angry. People are feeling they're losing identity. I don't know, how do we feel about that? Because, we're talking about the evolution of what it means to be, well, whatever, British, Nigerian, Jamaican, so many things. But there's a feeling I get that people have a sense that they're losing something. It's kind of being rooted in discussions around immigration, but it kind of feels, I get a sense from people that they feel like they're losing something. And what I'm really concerned about is that we're not just dismissing those people with those views, because without dialogue, things don't change. In fact, they get worse, in my opinion. So, in my mind, I'm thinking, how do we kind of entertain some kind of dialogue that actually moves us forward together? Because that's the key thing.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about this. Especially, I was in London. I wasn't at the protest, but I was in London when those things were going on, and I've seen a lot of the dialogue online. And again, I think nuance is really important. I think two things can be true. I think you can be concerned about immigration. I think you can be concerned about the number of people who are either legally or illegally coming into the country, as well as be conscious that it's not because it's not their fault, or it's not, as they're not necessarily to blame for all the things that are going on in the UK that means that it's not quite working. So often a lot of these migrants are being blamed for poor healthcare, is being blamed for schools being full or schools not working properly. They're being blamed for people not being able to get jobs. But in reality, is not the case. If these migrants were here, or if they weren't here, a lot of those problems will still be there. Obviously, I'm not to dismiss that it perhaps doesn't play a role, but it's not to blame. And I often think migrants are seen as a easy scapegoat, a easy person to blame for the failures of the government or previous governments in looking after public infrastructure. A lot of these things is as a result of a lack of funding, a lack of investment, a lack of public investment, a lack of private investment, the decade and a half of austerity, etc., etc. All that to say, yes, you can be concerned about migration or immigration or the amount of people crossing the line, crossing the border. I think some of that is a legitimate concern, because if you look at the numbers, that's not a sustainable way to grow. That's not a sustainable way for us to manage, our affairs. But there's also a number of other different things at play that we have to understand.
Yeah, no, I absolutely kind of, yeah. I mean, I hear you, and I don't know, it just goes from a football tournament where we literally are wrapping ourselves in a flag, or a rugby tournament where we're wrapping ourselves in a flag, and we are proudly saying this is our identity. We are proud to be who we are, raising an England flag, raising a Union Jack, whatever it might be at the time, to this other use of the flag saying this is who we are and who you aren't. And I think we really need to kind of pull ourselves back into the place where we are able to debate and discuss and educate, because the areas you're talking about there, the NHS was built on a foundation following the war of immigration that helped to kind of build that back up. Travel in this country, the railways, the trains, again, these were things that people who came to the country as immigrants helped to establish and build. So, do people understand and realize that and value that is kind of part of what I would love to understand some more about.
I also think, going back to the conversation we're having previously, if you do the ancestry and me test, if I do the ancestry and me test, if any of us do the ancestry and me test, obviously we know because of our makeup, we know that we have ethnicity that is not Anglo-Saxon. But if you were to do that test on any, I guess, white appearing person in the UK, you will find out that they come from all over the place. They come from 100%. All over the place. So the 100%. Idea that anyone is 100% British or 100% English is a fallacy, because we've been migrating and traveling all over the world since the dawn of time. So to have that idea is definitely a fallacy. So I think we just need to be more understanding of one another, more open to the dialogue, not dismiss even the beliefs or feelings that we don't necessarily agree with, not to be too quick to dismiss them within reason, of course. But yeah, I think if we just need a good understanding of one another.
Absolutely. And I think everything you've just said there, Maro, is about the beauty of the evolution that we've all been talking about in our own personal journeys of identity, and our children and our parents. So this is part of the evolution that will touch and connect every single person who's watching and listening to this. They will all have a history that is interesting and that is diverse in some sort of way. And I certainly agree that we need to hold on to that and explore that some more. And while our listeners are thinking about that, I'd also like them to hit subscribe. I'd also like them to follow us on socials. I'd also like them to like, share, tell a friend, because these are the conversations that I hope our listeners, those who are watching, will bring into their own households, their own friendship groups, to broaden this debate. And I'm looking forward to you sharing in the comments so that we can see what you're thinking, so we can learn from you. This world is about exchanging. We're exchanging all the time, walking down the road, saying hello to your neighbor, saying hello to someone who you don't know, having a quick chat about something with someone from a different culture, background. We're learning all the time, and we should never stop doing that. So yeah, get on this journey with us. We continue to have the chats, the discussions that matter. I'd now like to shift it to school, because we touched on school. And Maro, you're what's the term? Is there a term for someone who's gone to Harrow? Because it's a big deal, right? Harrow and Eton, like that kind of sticks out in everything that is British and English when you talk about schools. Those are probably the two schools that people refer to. So I have a fascination with Harrow and Eton, and I've gone and done talks at Eton. I've visited Harrow, and just being in that environment is just something really special. So to be there at school as a young person, like what is that like, and what does it give you, and what was your experience?
So I think it'll be worthwhile giving some context to, I guess, my education history. So I went to two state schools at primary level. I went to, I forgot the school. What's the school called? I went to St. Agnes. I went to
Right.
St. Agnes in Cricklewood. Then from there, I moved to the Annunciation in Burnt Oak. Then I went to a prep school. I went to a prep school in North London, Salcombe Prep. After that, I went to a state boarding school in Harpenden. So I was a boarder. My parents paid for the boarding, but their education was free, and I was there for 5 years up until year 11. Then for sixth form, I went to Harrow for the last 2 years of my secondary school education, and Harrow, I had a great experience there. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I was, again, it was a boarding school, a termly boarding school, and it was fascinating. They had their own language. They referred to teachers as beaks. Year nines were called shells. Year tens were called removes. It was just, yeah.
And what were you called in the sixth form?
What were we called? I think we were called, maybe we were called sixth form. I can't remember what we were
Maybe
called.
because you were too big and strong that nobody was felt like they could say something to you at that point.
Yeah, so it was really quirky, but there's a number of things that I witnessed going between the two schools. I guess I'll say this generally speaking, going between state and primary school, state and public school. And as I kind of said, I've kind of jumped between the two throughout my education. And I remember talking, when I first got to Harrow, talking to one of my guys on the rugby team there, and we were talking about GCSEs, as we all recently got our GCSE results, and I was pretty happy with my GCSEs. I think I got 7 A's, 2 B's, and the guy shook his head. Then as he shook his head, and I was like, "What? Did you think I was done with something?" Then he was like, "No, I thought you were a lot smarter."
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that just goes to show, I guess, the level of expectation that is naturally just there in that environment. The guy that I was speaking to was no smarter than me. He probably got better grades at GCSE than me, but he was no smarter than me. And me then being in that environment just pushed me. Then by the time I finished A levels, I was like amongst the top performers with regards to grades. But it was almost the expectation that everyone would get an A at A level. It was just what people did there. But it was quirky. It had loads of different things to do. Every kind of after school club that you could imagine, whether it's rifle shooting, whether it's I don't know, Chinese club, or
So what did you do, Maro? Sorry to interrupt you there. Is there anything else that you did outside of rugby that was okay?
So for 18 months, I was pretty focused on rugby. But then in the last 6 months, I was like, I'm probably not going to do all these things again in my life. So I tried to do as many clubs and societies as possible. So what did I do? I went to rifle shooting. I went rifle shooting. I think I went clay pigeon shooting once. I don't like shooting that much. They're the only times I've held a gun. There was the one, I forgot the name of it. The one where you have that skinny sword.
Fencing.
I went fencing. I might see if I can find a photo I took after that. So yeah, it was cool.
Oh man, clay pigeon shooting is amazing. I loved it. I've only done it once, and it brought me great joy. Fencing, never done fencing. I think that one's yeah, far beyond me. But Maro, listening to you talking about boarding school, I know you were a boarder as well, Will. That's right.
Yeah.
I was at state school and we didn't wear uniform at my school, so I found it like, wow, everyone's wearing uniform. It was almost like a bit of a lefty school in some sort of way, because like there was no kind of uniform. Certainly, the idea of boarding would have been just like it blows my mind even now, thinking about that. But you know, through my journey in life, I've spoken to lots and lots of people, and lots of people went to boarding school, right? But what were your experiences? Because it sounds like they were totally or pretty much positive.
Yeah, it was for me personally. I was very lucky. I was very lucky because when I went to boarding school, I went into a dormitory. There was a dormitory of 7 of us, and probably out of that 7, 5 of those people are till today my very good friends, if not amongst my best friends. And within our age group, so year below, year above, there's a core of us who, you know, if I was to have a party now, you'll see all of them there, and that flowed from St. George's, my first boarding school, to my second boarding school, Harrow. There's so many people from that school who I'm still super close with, and I had a great time as a result of it. For me, it was just like one massive sleepover with all my friends. So much so that my mum actually thought she was doing something wrong because I didn't want to come home. I just wanted to stay and have fun with my friends. But I do understand that experience is not the same for a lot of people. And I went to boarding school at 11. And when I look at 11-year-olds now, I'm like, wow, that's young. That is young. But I think it was great. I loved it. I loved the independence of it. Admittedly, both my boarding schools weren't that far from home, so I lived 30 minutes away. So whenever I needed to go home, it was always there. And I saw my parents loads. They were still in North London, so that bit wasn't necessarily a problem. But yeah, I'm keen to hear your thoughts, Will.
Yeah, I think I've got some similarities. I think maybe it was easier for me because I had an older sister that was at the school already. So I had like my safe person there. I think the biggest change for me was learning the language, because I spoke English with my dad at home whenever he was there, whenever we used to go to Nigeria, but I didn't feel comfortable speaking English. So the first year was quite tough, also because I had fallen in love with football. And yeah, my dad said that year that I wasn't going to be able to sign up for a football team. I had to learn the language first. That was kind of our deal. So we started the year off with a rugby term, which was, again, something alien to me. Uniform, alien, same. We had a room, there was 6 of us. It was actually 12, but the room was split with one door, so it was 6 and 6. And yeah, it was quite difficult to start because I was mischievous. So you had your strict bedtimes, you had to polish your shoes, you had to make sure you stand up straight when you make your bed in the morning before they let you go to the breakfast hall. So I found it quite difficult to all of a sudden have this really strict regime, and that also was coupled with a house status at our boarding school. So in my junior boarding house, Canterbury House it's called, you would get upgraded depending on how you behaved, and that was how much time you would have to play in the playroom, or you could have a mobile phone or different privileges. So it was difficult because the first year I spent a lot of time on something called NHS, which was no house status, which was the bottom of the bottom. So that literally meant that after school you would have to report straight to the boarding house, and you would sit there, and you couldn't really do so much. And then I think it kind of worked. I kind of worked in a rebellious way. So then I kind of wanted to prove my point and still want to get up to no good. And that was a learning curve for me the first year. But I do look back at it with a really positive feeling. I think it helped me so much. It gave me so much independence. Also, like you said, I've made some lifelong friends. I think it was slightly different because when I left at 15, turning 16 in the summer, I went into a whole different environment again, which was digs at a football academy where you had, a lot of Jack the lads, whoever were like the king of the hill in their school or their playground or their Sunday league team or whatever club they came from in Europe. So you kind of lost that camaraderie, I think, and like real close friendship to being into an environment where you're competing with each other. So I kind of sometimes I wish I had spent more time with those guys, because obviously between 15 and 20, whatever, you probably have a different connection with someone. And then my life kind of took a really sudden turn left and away from what they were all doing, which were preparing for sixth form and choosing universities and stuff like that. So it was a different path again. But I think that those first 5 years in England, I really enjoyed them. Also had a chance to do different things that I'd never done before at my school. It wasn't as elaborate as fencing and clay pigeon shooting, but I think they sound like harrow privileges. But it was nice, and it was a language school, and that was something that also helped me so much in life. So it really opened up my mind to learn different languages, and also made it easier to later in life, which I didn't know was going to happen yet, when I was traveling a lot, to feel comfortable in different environments. But it's not easy, and I think when you are a teenage boy being told what to do all the time, when you feel like you've got them on your own, is quite hard. Some of my schoolmates, they found that easier, and they were also going home on the weekends, whereas for us we had a set weekend a month where we could fly home to the Netherlands. So again, a lot of air miles and time in the sky, which felt comfortable for me because of going to Nigeria so much when I was a kid. But yeah, it was an experience, and now I have to debate at home whether or not what we're going to do with our kids. So my oldest is 7 now, and like you said, it's when I see him, I think, oh gosh, in 4 years, would he be ready to do something like that? I really don't know, it's something that really shapes you. But my oldest sister, I think she enjoyed it, but in the end found it quite difficult, maybe because she was the first, and from our neighborhood and where we grew up, it was something out of this world to even consider that. I knew my mum struggled with it a lot when my older sister went at the beginning, but for my dad, it was something special. He gave us an opportunity to have a good secondary education, and I feel for him that probably felt like one up from his chance, because he came to Europe to study when he went to university older than us. So and I think he really found it important for us to be able to speak English and to maybe have a little bit of a stricter regime than what we were getting offered in where we lived in Holland. So my youngest brother, who is also part of this podcast, he's not on screen, I think it also did him well, and he went on after us to go to school in Holland and after Nigeria. So we all had very different paths in that sense. But boarding school was I look back at it at a great time. And when I left at 15, I never thought I would come back and be part of the patrons of the school now. So I get to talk about important decisions and stuff like that. And when I see who else is on there, it's, for me, it's like a great privilege to be able to be recognized like that. And I think I can really see how much it can do for someone. I think it's something that's not suitable for everyone, because I think you probably have to look at the the personalities and the characters of the children. But I think for me at the time, someone who loved sports, and that was my way to connect with everyone, even when I found it difficult maybe to learn the language and stuff like that. It was a great time, and a great way to be exposed to different things. And the most important thing, the biggest takeaway probably was the independence and the confidence of being able to do stuff by yourself without your parents.
Will, you touched on it within your answer there, the decision about your own children and their education. Is it a difficult decision, or because of your experience and because of what private education can give you, it's a pretty straightforward one? And Mauro, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, I think it was the state school that I went to. So the boarding aspect is probably the biggest thing that we are thinking about. But my youngest two now, they do go to a private primary school. That is simply because it was the one that we liked the most in the area. But we talk about it all the time. I don't necessarily think it's an advantage or something that you have to pay for. But yeah, I think having maybe the luxury of being able to choose a school that you like, regardless if it's private or state school, is a real luxury. But yeah, we think about it all the time, and I think when my kids are ready for secondary school, we probably would look at what kind of things they're into. I think I'm a big fan of supporting them and like kind of guiding them according to their own ambition, and not really trying to make them do something that they don't really want to do. They have to be passionate about it. So, if it's a state school that excels in that area, if they already know what they're into, they might not know. Then that would be something that we would encourage. If it's a private school that might have, amenities like fencing, if that's what they like, then that might be something that we will think about. So I think you have to look at it case by case. And yeah, for me, it was I followed my older sister, but for all three of us, it was a different experience. I think that's probably the way that I would like to do it. But yeah, I think I'm still very grateful that my dad gave me that chance, because I think it's really formed me as a person. And even at the time when I wanted to be at home and spend time with my mum, I couldn't understand that vision. But I think that's also part of like growing up and becoming a dad yourself, and then you can see it from the other side. So it's a discussion, and in 4 years' time, I'll be able to give you the answer what school we go for then.
Yeah, I think it very much depends. It very much depends on the kid. It's hard to say it's definitely this or definitely that, because as you've kind of said, the skills and capabilities of the kid kind of dictate which direction you go. However, I think as a general rule of thumb, I think exposure to both is quite good, because with, I guess, the criticism with private school is that you're only exposed to one economic class of people, and the world isn't like that. The world is there's people from advantaged background, disadvantaged background, in the middle, whereas in a lot of private schools, the majority of it would be from advantaged backgrounds. So I think that the advantage is that you give, or at least increase the likelihood of your child having the skills to and understand and have empathy for different types of people. But that said, depending on the school, the state school can have its own challenges as well. There could be overcrowded classes. It could be, attention of the teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think exposure to both, if in the ideal sense, is quite good. Also, if they're smart enough, or if they're able to get into a grammar school, then why not? I personally don't have any political objections to grammar schools. I know some people do, but I'm reasonably comfortable with that. So yeah, it's as always a little bit of nuance.
And then, sorry, Maro, with you, so how did you find that decision then? So when your parents said, okay, you're going to be going to this boarding school at 11, was that something that you thought, oh my God, that is something that I'm worried about? Were you open to it? Did you understand the decision, or how was that for you when you were 11 years old?
So I have an older brother who's a year older than me, and he was at the school. So I was 10, he was 11. At 11, he went to school. So then I spent a year at home, kind of by myself. I say by myself with the rest of my family, but my brother wasn't there. And as you could imagine, we're so close in age. We used to play together all the time. He was my FIFA partner, my wrestling partner. We used to do everything together. So when he went to boarding school, that was the emotional day. Like, he was crying, I was crying. I think my sister was just looking at us like we're weird. But that was the emotional time. When it was time for me to go a year later, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait because one, I wanted to be with him, but two, as I said before, I was lucky enough to be in a friendship group who we all got on like a house on fire. So it wasn't, from my point of view, it wasn't hard at all. I was ready to go.
Well, I mean, I must admit, I'm thinking of my friendship group now, and from all of the people in my friendship group that I grew up with, like none of us, no one went to boarding school. So actually, for me, listening to you both is a real education, because I think also when you're outside of actually going to boarding school, then you can build up stereotypes of what it is and what it's about and what it means. And I think it's healthy to be challenged in all of that, because I think probably from the friends I grew up with and where I went to school was, I went to school in Highgate, right? One of the most affluent parts of the UK. But it was a state school and had people traveling from all parts of North London to come to this particular school. So you had this, what I thought was a beautiful, and still believe is a beautiful mix of people who are from lower income households, and some people living in some of the most incredible properties with wealth and access coming together. And actually, people learning from each other in those environments was what has given me, I believe, some of the skills that have helped me in my leadership journey to be able to navigate kind of the understanding of all the different groups that decisions impact and affect. And even within that group, we didn't have anyone who kind of had any experience of boarding school or even private school. So there was maybe a stereotypical view of that posh lot who go to private school, and there was like a them and us thing that was absolutely apparent. I mean, for me, thinking about whether I would send my kids to, what I would term a private school, public school, it's a really difficult one, because I say a difficult one. I mean, it's not so difficult in some ways, but my dad was a teacher his whole career and taught in Tottenham and taught in Brent, like two boroughs that have got, some real challenges and always have done, but also have incredible people, of course, who are doing incredible things. And, if I was to, and I know my dad will be listening to this, so I better get it right if I'm going to represent him. But his feeling was always like, we need to rise together in terms of, well, Leon, you could go to a grammar school, you could go elsewhere, but actually I think you being part of the local comprehensive school is a good thing, because you learn from other people, but also, your academic abilities, which were, decent, I guess, at the time, were actually a good thing for the school in terms of how the school achieves and attracts more funding, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's lots of complexities to it. Because I know there'll be someone like shouting at this podcast going, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. If you've got the money and you can send them to have the best, you go and give them the best." But in terms of what
is the best?
Saying is best, exactly that. And I think we're all on the same page in terms of the nuance around what is best and what is best for that person at that particular time and that child and their development and their character and who they are. So yeah, I've learned a lot from listening to you both, and I hope everybody who's listening to this podcast is enjoying the conversation and the level of depth we're getting into this. Hopefully people are being nice in the comments and not picking fun at some of the things that we're saying, because we're being vulnerable here and we're sharing personal experiences. I know the audience we're growing here will be hopefully engaged and understand the nuance that we're sharing. And if you like what you're hearing, here's the pitch. Go subscribe, go follow us on social media, please share. We're building a community. That community is about all of us, not just the three of us that you see on screen or you're listening to right now. So please get involved in the Power and Purpose podcast. We've got a little bit of time left, guys. And what I'd like to move on to now is, this is about leadership. And we're talking about school, we're talking about home, and we're sharing some memories. But what was our first leadership role? Where did it start? Like, were we 8 years old and asked to captain the rugby team, or like what was the thing about us and you where you ended up being a leader because this captain business that you guys are doing is stressful. I can see from the outside, and trust me, the stuff I'm doing, sometimes I'm banging my head against the wall, but it started from way back. It's not something that just landed today. So I'm interested in where your leadership journey started when you were young.
Yeah, so my first leadership role was when I went to the park as an 11-year-old and we played Wembley Rules. Wembley Rules, and I was captain. So I picked my team. But you know what? I wasn't really in many leadership so-called positions when I was in school. I was like a school prefect, etc. So I guess they were. But I wasn't like the captain of any of the teams I played for. But I don't necessarily believe you have to be the captain or you have to be, the person who said you're going to be in charge of this to demonstrate leadership capabilities. So I like to think I always demonstrated a little bit, but I'll probably say Wembley Rules.
Wembley Rules, the good old times. I think mine was probably similar. I think my first time was at school, primary school. Once people realised I was actually not bad at playing football, I got to be the one who could pick pick one of the two teams. And that's how it started. And I think my first maybe more official role was in secondary school. My form, I was a sports captain. So you got a nice badge. I think that was maybe also partially because my teacher wanted to give me some responsibility so I would be less naughty and, would strive and obviously saw something that I was proud of and I really enjoyed doing. So, and that kind of grew. Saying when I joined an academy at Spurs at the time, I was probably one of the boys that was most far behind because I joined the football club so late. Some of the kids were there from very young. And my first season as a scholar, I didn't play really. And the second season, I think similarly, they wanted to encourage me to take ownership. And I remember the first time I could put on the armband, I really loved that. So it felt like I could really express myself. So I've always enjoyed, being a organizer. I think also part of my role on the pitch was required that. Then when I had my first training session with the first team, probably just to make up the numbers, I remember we had a coach there called Stefan Freund, and he was really clear and said to me, your position, you have to speak. The more you speak, the easier the game becomes around you, the easier it is to concentrate, and the better you organize the players in front of you, the less you actually have to do. So that's something that I will always remember. Even though that was such a brief interaction, a one-off training session with the first team at the time. And from there on, I always felt like I wanted to take the lead. Maybe it's because I'm a bit of a control freak when it gets to some things. And as I kind of grew older and became more comfortable with the role, it became less about me. And actually now when I look at it, I always try to think about how I can make the team feel most comfortable and how I can get everyone to express themselves in the best way, because then you have a collective goal and everyone is pulling in the right direction. So it's something that you learn, and it went very much from wanting to do everything myself. When I think about being at primary school and wanting to dribble the whole team and not pass the ball to anyone, to actually understanding that that's not how a real teamwork goes, and wanting to see how you can also empower others and delegate. And I think that has probably been my biggest lesson over the years as I grew more comfortable with my role. But I'm always still learning, and it's always been great to listen to other leaders and look at players that have played ahead of me, in my younger years, and even on our last episode when Maro explained how other leaders do that. And I think there's so many different ways to fill that role in. There's some parts about definitely are leading by example and being there for your team and taking that role. And I think another thing probably is the vocal part, which certain positions kind of demand from you. And then automatically you have to make sure that you always are in the right position, doing the right things, or at least trying to do the right things, because, it's difficult to ask other people to do their job if you're not doing your own job. So that was my earliest experience of leadership and being a captain. And something that I really enjoy now. But it's definitely changed to a role of, wanting to empower others and help for a greater good.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because there's just so many different routes into leadership, and often leadership chooses you. And so in my case, a lot of friends that I sort of will see now, they're completely shocked and surprised I ended up doing anything on TV. They're shocked and surprised that I'm kind of standing at the front and speaking, because like when they knew me as a kid, I was super, super quiet. So like I was the guy who didn't put my hand up and say, I'll go first. So that's something that I've kind of, I don't know, just evolved into. And a lot of the time it's felt like, well, no one else is going to do it. So, all right, I'll have a go. And certainly my first leadership role was, in the school football team. And essentially I was chosen because I was behaving pretty well at school and doing pretty well academically. So it was like, you're a nice kid. Like you can have a go at being the captain and representing the school in the way we wanted you to be represented. And it was less so about me and my attributes leading others at that time, I felt. So yeah, really interesting kind of different journeys and different experiences with leadership. We're going to continue this in the series quite clearly. I feel like we've got a lot more to say, but sadly, that's all we've got time for. So we're going to have to draw this to a close. But in the next pod, we're going to focus on how you lead when you feel like everything is going wrong and is against you. We're sharing lots of triumphant stories of leadership. But what about when it's all going wrong and you feel like you're really up against it? I think many people will resonate with that. And for those who are kissing their teeth right now because we've not brought any leadership guests to the table just yet, do not worry. We are on the case. We've got some fantastic guests coming. We will introduce them in to this podcast very, very soon. But for now, we're signing off and looking forward to you coming back to the next pod. So get subscribing, commenting, sharing, liking. Power and Purpose is your podcast. We are delighted to be leading it and bringing it to you. Let's continue to build something special. See you all soon.